Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at Tablemon. In this video, I am going to discuss what the metagame might look like in both of the regionals taking place this weekend, Knoxville and Bochum, as well as the 3 different decks that I would consider playing if I were going to either of these and why I would choose to play them. If you want to support the channel, you can use code Tablemon to get 5% off at Potent Store for your online codes, 10% off for your sealed product at Flipside Gaming, and 20% off for your superfoods at Amaranthi. Or if you're looking to buy singles or sleeves, you can fill up your cart and close the tab, then click on the affiliate link in the description and check out. That way you can support the channel over at TCG Player, Card Market, and Dragon Shield. This video is sponsored by the Pokemon TCG deck building website PokemonCard.io. Now, please keep in mind, these are very rough numbers and I could be very off. But given how the metagame has been pretty stable in terms of deck popularity since LAIC and the first Lugia appearance back then, I fully expect to have around 30% of the metagame to be Lugia V-Star at both of these events. Now, in second place, and especially since Lost Box won the most recent Oceania International Championships, I do expect Lost Box to be a little bit more popular than it has been. It used to be, or it has been a little under at 20% of the metagame consistently over the past few events. However, given how it just won and it did feature a few of the newer cards from Crowd Senate, such as Skyseal Stone and Samazenta in top 8, I do expect Lost Box decks to rise in popularity, both the variants that did well at OCIC and also the Rayquaza Raikou variant. Afterwards, I think Mew will remain at around 13% of the metagame. It did quite well this past weekend paired with Aerodactyl V-Star, and Mew is a very easily and accessible deck thanks to the battle decks that came out not too long ago. It's a very cheap deck to build, it's a very powerful deck, of course, and I fully expect Mew to remain a force in the metagame. And then finally, we did see Regigigas also get a really good result back at OCIC, and Regigigas has maintained its popularity at around 5, 6, sometimes 7% over the course of the last few events. So since it did so well at Oceania, I do expect it to bump up a little bit for these upcoming weekend of events. Now, outside of that, whenever we get like a very dominant Lugia weekend, such as the past one where we had half of day 2 being Lugia V-Star and half of top 8 being Lugia V-Star as well, that's when the counters usually come up. So this 4%, I assigned it to Arceus Duraludon. That has been one of the most popular attempts at counter decks, because of course it's not a perfect counter deck, but it is one of the decks that attempts to counter Lugia with Duraludon VMAX's ability. However, we could also see Eldegoss control. We could also see other Yveltal control variants, not just the Eldegoss one, and we could also see Paralysis make some sort of comeback, even though Lugia decks have been preparing quite well against those decks with Wash Energy and Snorlax along with Birdkeeper. And then the rest of the metagame is pretty out there. We could see, or we're definitely going to see Goodra, we're definitely going to see Vikavolt, and we're definitely going to see a wide array of decks based on Arceus and other V-Stars, but so far the dominant decks will of course continue to remain the same since we haven't had a shake-up of the metagame, and we're all waiting for this to change with Scarlet and Violet. And so that brings us to the question, what to play, right? Of course, there's different playstyles, there's different preferences, and I always, in the coaching that I do to my students, I always tell them the best deck for you is the one that you are the most confident in, right? Because if you're confident in your deck and you're confident in its potential and your decision making, then it's usually always going to be better to choose a deck that you're going to make very few mistakes with, even if it's not like the absolute best Lugia deck or whatever. It's always best to play a deck that mistakes are minimized, and therefore in close matchups or in close situations, you can make the best possible play to maximize your win condition. Now, having said that, this would be the first deck that I would play, or that I would consider playing if I were playing this weekend. I've made top 8 with this deck at San Diego. It's a deck that I've played in the last few events, and nothing in the metagame at all has told me to switch it up, honestly, in terms of anything being or anything affecting it directly or making it worse than it currently is. I love this deck. I love the potential of Rayquaza. I love the pressure that the combination of Raikou and Sableye do apply. And even though Lugia decks have started to adapt somewhat by including Wash Energy, I think it's very beneficial that we just saw the best performing Lost Box deck at Oceania not feature Raikou and not be super focused on Sableye. But especially like the two Lost Box decks that did well this weekend, they're not focused on bench damage, right? No Raikou, no Amazing Rare Raikou made an appearance, and no Kyogre made an appearance. It's actually been taken out of the main deck that it was being utilized. That means there's definitely less of an incentive to create an 100% immune Manaphy with Wash Energy in Lugia's bench. And that, of course, plays into the role of Raikou. Now, it might even be the case that some decks start taking out their Manaphy, because if you take a look at the top 8 decks, there's, other than the standard Raikou in Lugia, there's not a lot that's applying pressure to the bench, whereas before you had to worry about a bunch more Raikou versions and Kyogre decks as well. That seems to not have been the case from Oceania, so if you only take a look at the top 8 decks, then that could be an adaptation that some players will make, making this deck even stronger because Raikou is just that powerful, and if there's a Manaphy stopping Raikou, then you want to use Sableye to eliminate that. The only change that I'm making, and one that was a hard lesson to learn, not a lesson to learn, of course I know that Hisuian Heavy Ball is a card that is beneficial to the deck. I just felt very hard pressed to justify its inclusion, but after the unsavory taste in my mouth, where I failed to make day 2 at Orlando Regionals purely on the fact that I priced Manaphy in my win and in, and it remained priced for the whole of game 2, and that led to me losing. That means I am definitely not going to take that risk again. And in such a big tournament as this weekend, whether you're going to Knoxville or Bochum, I do believe it's a worthy inclusion. And yes, having one less quick ball will affect the deck's overall early setup, but having the heavy ball also is a good way to eliminate a little bit of tournament fatigue in a way, because obviously figure out your price cards is very important for this deck specifically to help make and optimize the decisions with the flower selectings and the Ulrises. So if at any point you just find the Hisuian Heavy Ball, even if you didn't prize any Pokemon, it's worth playing and then writing down your price cards if that's your jam, or if not, then at least taking a look at them and trying to remember them, because then that makes that removes a little bit of the headache of trying to figure out your price cards. It also saves time, which in best of 3 scenarios, this deck can take a little bit to try and win games, or like to finish games rather, whether you win or lose, purely because you're a single price deck. So the Hisuian Heavy Ball not only helps you in finding that copy of the Pokemon that you need, but it also helps in speeding up your games a little bit. So I do think it's a worthy inclusion, an easy 1-for-1 swap, and calling it a day. This is my number 1 choice if I were playing this weekend. I'm very sad that I'm not, but yeah, this would be my number 1 choice. Now, the next deck that I would consider playing at this event is, I know, super boring Lugia V-Star. Honestly, this Lugia deck in particular, I'm really liking it, especially given how I expect more Lost Box deck to pop up, and also a little bit more counter decks in the sense of Arceus Duraludon against Lugia. I fully think that the Canceling Cologne combination with Irida and Luminion is very underrated right about now. Canceling Cologne not only allows you to counter a Duraludon VMAX and allows you to go through it without having to Lost Vacuum away any tool card, but you also get to use Canceling Cologne plus Boss's Orders to get a 2-price turn against Lost Box decks. Now, most Lost Box decks are not playing any disruption. If they are, it's only Roxanne, definitely not Marnie. So you can just search for you can use the Irida, search for the Cancel Cologne, and save the Luminion for next turn, and then the turn afterwards you can go Boss's Orders, Luminion for Boss's Orders, bring up the mana fee, play the Canceling Cologne, power up Raikou, and get 2 prizes that way. And now that's really detrimental against Lost Box decks. They really need you to not take two price turns against them, and one they cannot do anything about, which is Stoutland. Yeah, the only thing they can do is make sure that they have an immediate KO or return KO on the Stoutland V to prevent you from getting 2 price cards that way. But if you get two price turns, one with Raikou and one with Stoutland, that can sometimes be very, very overwhelming against Lost Box decks. And if you're having a rough time as a Lugia player against Lost Box, then this is definitely a strategy for you to try out. So Canceling Cologne helps with those two. It also helps with random mill tanks, helps with, I'm sure, other stuff, but the main thing is the Raikou combo. And if that combo will be something that you end up utilizing and something worthwhile against one of your main counters in Arceus Duraludon, and one of the most popular decks and best decks in the format, which is Lost Box, then I absolutely think that is worth it. Outside of that, as you can see, there's no Serena in this list. I instead opted to go with the triple Boss's Orders and the triple Marnie, which is also something that I think not a lot of people will expect. Many players will take a look at the top list. Some are playing 3 Marnie, very few are playing 3 Boss's Orders. So if they see 2 Marnies or if they see 2 Boss's Orders in your discard pile, they might feel a little too safe, and then you hit them with that 3rd Boss's Orders or you hit them with that 3rd Marnie, and that could completely ruin whatever plan they had. Now, the last switchable card that I guess we can talk about is the V-Guard Energy. That could easily be a speed energy. I would not be opposed to that, or even a hiding energy. The V-Guard Energy has its uses. I do think it's very, very good and almost necessary against Mew VMAX, and that is why it is in there. But you could also play the hiding or the speed in order to help you use your amazing rare Pokemon more often. One big weakness about this list, however, is that it only has 2 counters to Path to a Peak in Lost Vacuum and Pumpkaboo, and that can make the Regigigas matchup a little bit harder, but we do have Dunsparce and Manaphy as well in the list to help cover weakness and help cover bench damage, so that will certainly be important to note. Yeah? So this would be my number 2 deck. And now for the spicy choice. Now, why do I like this deck? It features a heavy Marnie Path Arceus disruption that Arceus has been known for, and it also can force your opponent to play to 8 price cards. Similar strategy to Arceus Duraludon. The way we're trying to counter Lugia V-Star is through weakness, and as we've seen, Dunsparce is usually the card that ends up being caught in terms of text in Lugia decks. So having weakness advantage against them is pretty important and pretty good. And of course, Flying Pikachu VMAX with a Max Balloon attack is basically a direct counter to Lost Box decks. Now, of course, Lost Box decks do have ways around the effect with Escape Ropes, with Boss's Orders, and also Sableye, and maybe sometimes the Shred attack, although that's not going to be enough if it's coming from a Dragonite. But that's where the 2 copies of Big Parasol come in. But the main idea behind this deck is to try and create this low Pokemon, force 8 prices scenarios that a lot of decks find or have a hard time dealing with. It's different than Arceus Duraludon in that sense. And we also feature paralysis, right? Which paralysis under Marnie plus Path can also be very difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. And not only that, we also have 3 copies of Path to a Peak and 2 copies of Temple of Sinnoh. So we're definitely always going to be winning that Stadium War, and Temple of Sinnoh could be very good against Lugia and other decks as well. So this combination is something that I've seen do really well at online tournaments, rather at tournaments in Japan. It has not placed at all in this side of the world. I do feel like it's an underrated concept, yeah. And when I've played with it, it has played out pretty good. It also is a very linear deck in that sense. It's an easy deck to pick up and play. So that factors into the fact that if you're going to be playing 9 rounds at the regional and you think it's going to be exhausting, then this could be a good option to make sure that you have a more linear plan. That doesn't mean the deck doesn't need important decision making. especially with the supporters, when to time the Marnie, when to play Colress, when to play Serena, when to play Boss's Orders, and when to make sure that you can right hand to fully power up or re-power up. Yeah, the right hand is there, especially so that you can power up something in case Arceus V-Star or Arceus V went down before you were able to power up. It's super, super important to have access to that right hand. We also have the Quick Balls and the Ultra Balls in order to maximize the search along with the Evolution Incense and the single switching card. But the paralysis under Marnie and Path to Peak, I think, is something that is very, very underrated right now. It's, of course, something that other decks tried to do with Articuno, and sometimes Zekrom, but this is a much more threatening strategy in my opinion. Yeah, I don't expect this deck to be popular at all, which also means you won't be playing mirror matches throughout the day, which I know a lot of people dislike playing those. And yeah, it's like a spicy deck where it seems like it's good enough to be able to do well, but it might struggle against random things. Yeah, but against the top 3 decks, which are Lugia, Lost Box, and possibly Mew, then even though there's no Drapion, you do have the 4 Marnie plus Path to try and disrupt them. They will be playing their own paths, of course, but then that just means they're gonna have a harder time countering your Path to Peak with their only their counters, and they should also struggle against continuous paralysis from Tapu Koko VMAX, along with having high amounts of HP. So all of that, if you go into a tournament with a very solid game plan and matchups against the top 3 decks in the format and the top in terms of power and popularity, then I feel like you're in for a good ride. Yeah, and then add in Regigigas, which is the 4th most popular, and you should also have a pretty decent matchup against them with the double flying Pikachu VMAX. Then this is a recipe for victory. Yeah, this would be my spicier choice. And with that, hopefully this video is useful for you, whether you're going to the tournaments or you just want to keep up with the metagame and know what to expect. These are my personal predictions. This is sort of how I prepare for an event, the sort of thoughts that go through my head before I travel to one of these big events and prepare for these big events. What's going to be played? How did the previous tournament affect this? Or how do I expect the previous tournament to have affected the metagame this weekend? Because of course everyone's thinking about what will happen, right? So making some educated guesses and also some bold predictions, and then maybe taking a risk with that Tapu Koko deck. Sometimes those risks can pay off. Of course, if you end up facing against non-meta decks, it could go really, really wrong. But if you do, then it could go really, really well. And with that, we will conclude the video. Thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate the support. Whether you're liking the video, subscribing, sharing it, or you go out of your way and support with how I showed, or I show in every video with the sponsors that support the channel. I really appreciate it. Definitely in the upcoming months with the migration from PitCGO to PitCG Live, both coaching and videos are in a little bit of a weird situation. So if you can support the channel and my content in any other way, even becoming a member, yeah, it's only $1.99 I believe, or depending on where you live it might change. But if you enjoy the videos and you think they're worth $2 per month, that could be a nice way to support the channel and become a Tablemon member. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.